when I interviewed in the NFL, it was just you interview with a couple people, you get hired. It's not that extensive. I would imagine a general manager interview. What is that like? What is it? How does it go?
Yeah, I mean, it's really it's a get to know you session first and foremost, as far as your background, and you kind of telling it to someone else to where they get a firsthand account of who you are. I mean, in a very quick. I mean, you don't have all day, so you have to tell them a little bit about who you are and where you come from. Although they've heard it, they've researched it, they want to hear it from your perspective. Why you are who you are from a football perspective and from a personal perspective. And then really, like, what does it take to win in the NFL? Really, what does it take to win, in your view, in the NFL? From a management perspective, from a coaching perspective, from a player perspective, from a culture perspective, from a team building perspective. What does it take to win? Maybe why hasn't that team won? What would you change about that team? What kind of coach would you go after? Why would you go after that person? What kind of person are they? And you do this all basically from memory. You're not sitting there going through your book going, okay, hold on, let me get to the page on team building and then read it. I would draft all players who are 6'. You can't do that. It's back.
Height, weight, speed, fast, physical, family, football.
Yeah.
God.
No, I mean, you have to be able to articulate your philosophical approach to team building and character assessment and draft philosophy and free agency philosophy in a very free-flowing type of conversation, almost like we're doing right now. Except the difference is the person sitting across from you could be, Steve Tisch and John Mara and, the New York Giants. And then depending upon how you answer questions, they may have a follow-up question on that. And so it really, to me, I love the process because it's enjoyable to talk about why you believe what you believe about football and why you feel as though what you believe is something that would translate into wins in $1 billion, organization. So
would you say
it's high stakes? What's that?
Sorry, finish.
No. I mean, it's high stakes. It's pressure packed. It isn't all, you're not just sitting there laughing and giggling the whole time. But there's some light moments to it too, because I mean, these people and are men and women who are human beings too. But I mean, it's deadly serious, and you're trying to do it in a very condensed amount of time. Like right now, when you do it in because of all the COVID restrictions and all, you could only do it over Zoom. Before the season ended, and it was a 2-hour limit, so you had to get in a lot of information and have a lot of things asked of you, and you had to explain a lot of things in a short amount of time. Now, in previous years when you could go and visit the teams, I mean, interviews would last anywhere between 4, 5, 6 hours. So I mean, it's all football, and it's good. It really is good. It's a process that I like and I look forward to, because I like talking football, and I've been around some real good people that I think I've come up with a pretty good way of going about things, and I'd like to see if I could how successful I could be at it if it was totally on my shoulders, so to speak, to kind of put it all together.
Well, speaking of that, on your shoulders, I would imagine it comes up. It definitely always comes up when guys get hired. Who has the juice? Who doesn't have the juice? How much is them talking about who is the coach you'd want or the list of coaches you want? And then is it discussed, like, are you comfortable? Obviously, the coach, game day roster, draft roster. Does that all that stuff come up immediately?
Yeah, I mean,
53.
Those are questions that are asked. But my philosophy on that has always been, look, if I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time about who has control over what, then I'm already focused on the wrong things. I'm not even really focused on the relationship then. I'm just focused on how much power do I have. So when you're really that preoccupied with that, what that tells me is that, to me, that's a warning sign for myself, or if I heard that from someone else, that, those extremes I'm talking about, where you're going to hit some of those potholes, or maybe you have a whole bunch of success. Well, to me, that's a precursor for there being some kind of power struggle in those situations, because you're just worried about that. How about, to me, my focus is always just about, hey, look, I'm big on relationships. You know that, John. I'm big on communication, and I'm big on having philosophical alignment with the people, and and I would want to build a football team with someone who generally sees football the same way that I do, or I see it the same way that they do, and we can learn from each other. So that's really what I'm more concerned about when you're talking about head coach selection and all. All that other stuff, you kind of will work out how we're going to figure out, who ultimately has control. But if you're in a situation where you're forcing players on the field that a coach doesn't want, or a coach is playing players that you don't want, you're probably doomed to fail anyway.
Yeah.
How do you talk to? I think one of the reasons you've had. I was going to say, Lewis, I think one of the reasons watching on TV you resonate is because you say what you think and you say it very directly. A lot of times, people that are hiring a new GM or a new coach, it's because they have not had success. What's your philosophy on how you talk to the owner of a team who's saying, why haven't we had success? And part of the reason, you have to tell them to their face why you think they've been failing in a way, right? How do you do you tell them that? Like, what do you do?
I see your point. That's a good question, because a lot of what you're saying is, well, why would they believe you? If you don't have a track record of having done it yourself, well, then, any first-time GM can say the same thing. But then you could say, well, but they were with an organization that, maybe had some success. Well, you don't know how much that guy was actually responsible for them having success.
Right.
Just like if an organization had a bunch of failures, you don't know how much that guy was actually dissenting from the prevailing opinion, and maybe they would have had more success if they were listening to that guy. I guess what you have to do is this. I think, and this is where it becomes imperative that the people who are doing the hiring also have to have a certain level of competency about when, to know when they're hearing the thing that makes sense and when they're being fed a bunch of BS. Okay? So they have to do their work too. Right? So they have to be knowledgeable about the game too. And maybe that's where some teams struggle. Like people go in there and just kind of tell them a bunch of things that sound real good and sound like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll hire you. I like this guy. And next thing you know, they've come to find out that they're not that good. Well, one of the things that I always try to impress on people, and hopefully they believe what I'm saying and they can go and talk to these same people, is that, and I've said this all along, I was lucky enough to be coached by the greatest NFL coach of all time and probably the greatest college football coach of all time at the same time. And everything that I believe about football really comes from what those guys taught me. Everything that I learned about the managerial side of the game comes from one guy who's in the Hall of Fame and another guy who's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Joe Gibbs when I was in Washington, and Andy when we were in Philadelphia. So if you want to talk to Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Joe Gibbs, Andy Reid, and then anyone else underneath those people there have been some really successful people, you can verify with them whether or not I know they believe I know what I'm talking about. So that's kind of how it goes, right? Because I don't have a track record of actually building a team. So I guess what you're saying is, well, why would an owner believe what you're saying? Well, I guess that's kind of like how it goes. I mean, you have to kind of put together a very rock solid, fundamentally sound plan from A to Z about why you would turn their team around and why you think they've haven't achieved. And then they have to go back and ask some of the people that you've worked with, hey, we really believe that this guy sounds very, very competent. Do you share the same sentiments? And you just hope that those people tell them the same thing, and that, yeah, they're worth taking the chance on to try and build your program and turn it around. And, if you're going after one of these jobs, you just hope that that's the case.
Do you always feel good? I mean, when the thing ends, have you had – are the experiences always different, or would you say they're pretty similar every time?
I'll speak to this year. This year in particular, every experience when I come out, when I've been done, John, honestly, I felt like that's about as good as I could do.
Yeah.
Because the questions were good. The back and forth was really good. And I think right now I'm at the peak of, well, not the peak, because you're always learning. You're always improving. But right now I'm at a pretty good spot, I feel, as far as what I think about the game both on the field and off the field. I'm at a pretty good spot. And a lot of that has to do, I have to, give thanks to ESPN because of being on Monday night and doing college football last year and covering the draft the way I do. I've been able to look at so many different things and talk to so many different people and compile so many different ideas and go, yeah, I really like this one, or I don't necessarily like that one, from some of the best minds in the game, man. I mean, it's like to just kind of get on the phone and talk football with Sean McVay for 30 minutes. I mean,
what is it like?
You get overloaded.
Yeah, well, I don't know. What is it like? Are you a big McVay guy?
You get overloaded with stuff. I mean, he's freaking brilliant. He's brilliant. If you listen to Brandon Staley talk about defense, his defensive coordinator, this guy is next level when it comes to knowing how to defend the passing game and create matchups.